Hi everybody, and welcome to Pit Stop. And let me tell you about a weekend we had last weekend. Some championships have been decided at the Motorsport International Speedway, and of course around the globe there are still championships to be decided as we wind down to the end of the season. Well, last weekend at Bristol it was a pretty impressive run for the Winston Cup cars, another bang-em-up show for the NASCAR boys. And of course this weekend coming up at Vancouver, we've got the Indy cars and Jacques Villeneuve going for the championship there. David Embringham is going to be trying to get back the lead in the Atlantics from Richie Hearn. And of course, at the Speedway last weekend at Motorsport, well, we had some exciting racing as well to recap from that. And then coming up this weekend as well, we've got the Motorsport International Speedway points finale, and then of course just left will be the Invitational following this. Last weekend, Trans Am racing was not so great for Ron Fellows. He ended up with an 11th place finish. Tommy Kendall won the race. Now, as far as the championship is concerned, Chevrolet is still out in front for the manufacturers, but the points are going to be pretty tight for Ron to try and make the championship his this year. With just one race left, Tommy Kendall pretty much has a commanding lead at the point. He's got the mathematical chance, but let's cross our fingers. But in the meantime, let's take a look at all the races from last weekend as we recap the Formula One race, the Trans Am race, and of course all the action from the Motorsport International Speedway. Kick it off first in Belgium and Formula One, another win for Michael Schumacher. Damon Hill finishes second, and it was quite a race. Michael Schumacher is still on his way to another championship. The German driver has 66 points now. We move to Trans Am. Tommy Kendall wins the race in Road Atlanta, and there it is, Ron Fellows, that 11th place finish. He started 5th with that inversion, the quick qualifier. Jerry Simmons finished 21st. Last lap crash really hurt Ron. Tom Kendall now has 29 points ahead of the Canadian. Manufacturers looking pretty tight, 75 for Chevrolet, Ford with 71. Can-Am Midgets race number 20 at Peterborough Speedway. The win went to Jeff Riberty. As far as the points are concerned, well, Keith Dempster and Mark Samet are out in front there, first and second. The battle for third's real tight. Now from Motorsport, August 26th, first the Thunder cars. Ken Donaldson leads the points. He won the feature. In Street Stocks, Rick Boucher won the feature, but Graham Brown has locked up the championship. The season is over for the Street Stocks. That's the top 5 for the 1995 season. Late model sportsman's Alex Hamilton returned to the winner's circle, but Mike Horton leads the points. Finally, modifieds, Dwight Brown won the feature, but Graham Brown has won the championship there as well. Now we've got something to show you about track support technicians involved in the IndyCar series. We spoke with Pete Spence, track support engineer with Ford Cosworth, as he told us what they do for the IndyCar teams, and specifically what Ken Deagle does for Jacques Villeneuve in his hopes to win the championship. Well, when Jacques Villeneuve set his track record here at the Toronto Molson Indy to capture the pole, he didn't do it as himself. He had a team, and he had some engineers behind him helping out. Ford Cosworth help out with all the teams, in fact. What is your involvement here at the track on race weekends?
Well, Glenn, we provide engineering support to all the teams who use our engine program. We bring this trailer with us to every race, other than the races that are in Australia, for example. We bring diagnostic computers, engine spares, a small workshop, all contained within this trailer that goes to all the races. We provide one engineer who's assigned to each team that uses our engine, and he will work with that team anytime the engine is running at any track that they care to race at, to ensure that they get the optimum performance from the engine.
Well, talking about Jacques' team, then his engineer is Ken Deagle, and what is it that Ken will do there in the pit during sessions? We see him with the computer and going over notes and talking to Jacques.
Ken will monitor all the engine functions. He's looking to monitor general engine health and also to check on any diagnostic functions that the engine control unit throws up that may allude to potential problems. He's looking to optimize the engine performance working with the car and the driver. So he's looking for feedback from the driver at all times as to how the engine is running in particular corners, on particular straightaways. He's looking to optimize the boost control system, working within the regulations of the maximum boost that is allowed in this series and policed by the CART pop-off valve device, which is provided by CART, the organizing authority, to all cars, fitted to all engines, to control the maximum boost pressure that you're allowed to run. So he's working with the boost control system to make sure that the team have as much horsepower available as they can possibly have.
Would you say that that's the key area then is maximizing your boost, or is there another area that you guys try to concentrate most to help Jacques capture things like poles here in Toronto and 3 in a row?
Well, for qualifying, your fuel consumption is less important than the maximum horsepower you can derive from any particular engine. You're just looking to go as quickly as you can, qualifying, of course. But all the way through practice and qualifying, you need to monitor the lap fuel consumption versus the lap time, and that's what Ken will be doing, along with the engineer that's assigned to the job or to that task with Team Green. And between the two of them, they'll be looking to derive an optimum race strategy and look at the pit stop windows for any particular race. Here at Toronto, for example, fueling is quite tight. It is a fuel consumption race. It's typical of street circuits where there's a lot of throttle input and not a lot of straightaway time.
As far as some of the other components that help control the engine, the black box, we see that a problem for teams. They come in and change it. You work, as you mentioned earlier to me, that you've got all your own stuff there, so that must be a little bit more pleasing for yourselves to know that everything is in your own control.
It is. It's part of our arrangement is that we supply all the control electronics and systems for the engines, and it gives us, as you say, better control of the engine, and sending one engineer who is fully trained in optimizing engine performance with each team gives the team an advantage in that they no longer have to think about working with the engine. It allows them to concentrate on car performance. What we aim to do is to turn up at the circuit and to go racing, not to do engine development.
How many engines would a team use in a weekend? Would they have a separate one for practice, qualifying, maybe warm up and race? What's the deal there on how many engines they'll use?
Typically, assuming there are no failures and things being as stressed as highly as they are in motor racing, occasionally you do get failures, but assuming there are no failures, they typically use 2 engines, one for practice and qualifying on the Friday and Saturday, and they typically change on Saturday night for a fresh one for the race.
Is there a difference in the amount of mileage that you would get out of those 2 different types of engines?
No, essentially they're the same type of engines. They'll both stay in the car for probably 450 to 500 miles.
Wow. As far as Ford's developments, beyond IndyCar racing, Cosworth is pretty involved here in Canada in the Windsor area.
That's correct. We have a castings plant in Windsor which makes castings for Ford engines, blocks, sumps, cylinder heads, for example. It uses a patented Cosworth casting process which was developed through the 1960s to allow Cosworth to cast cylinder heads and cylinder blocks for the original Formula One racing engine with which Cosworth became so famous. Because at that time it was impossible to buy from a subcontractor castings of the necessary integrity. So Cosworth derived and developed this casting process, which is now patented and sold under license to, for example, the Ford Motor Company, such as the plant that is in Windsor.
You know, for years we saw Ford, we saw Chevy, Cosworth, Ilmor. Now you've got a few more Mercedes, Honda, Toyota's coming up. Do you like all this competition?
Yeah, it keeps racing alive, doesn't it? If you look at the grid from yesterday, for example, the starting grid for today, with less than half a second covering the top 10 and less than a second covering the top 20. It's fantastically competitive at the moment. A lot of young, hungry drivers and a lot of hungry engine manufacturers now as well. All helps to keep the series as competitive as possible.
Absolutely. And on that note, Formula One racing, we just see a couple runaways and that's it. We don't see near the competitiveness. Any thoughts about that, and any fears that with more manufacturers of engines getting involved with IndyCar, that may go this way?
It is a fear, and I sincerely hope that it doesn't happen. It won't happen in this series, I believe, because the organising body takes a strong input from the team owners themselves, and I think the team owners are all quite resolute in their desire to keep costs down. If you look at Formula One in comparison, the costs are fantastic and can only be supported at such a high level because of such a large financial input from manufacturers. But I believe that the kart owners in particular have done a very good job to now of limiting the financial input that is actually necessary to be competitive in this series by, for example, controlling some of the materials and the design of some of the components they are allowed to use in the engines in this series. For example, in Formula One, you can use pneumatic valve systems, you can use a lot of titanium materials, and this all drives the costs skywards. In this series, you're much more limited, and I think we benefit in competitive terms from that.
Well, Pete, thanks very much for all that you've shared with us today. It's been very informative, and good luck to Ford Cosworth here in Toronto and the rest of the season.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Our thanks to Pete and Ford Cosworth as they move on to Vancouver now to try and help Jacques win that championship. Now we move along to our final installment on that interview with Ron Fellows. We sat in his house, and this time we talk a little bit about Canadian road racing, and Sam Fellows joined in on the conversation.
I'm not real happy with the way things are in Canada. I don't think there are too many people that could be. We had the crop that you're seeing at the professional ranks in IndyCar and Formula Atlantic, Indy Lights, and myself in Trans Am. That group came out of that boom period that happened in the 80s and the mid-80s through the early 90s. And that doesn't exist anymore. You know, we had Players GM Series, Rothman's Porsche Turbo Cup, Export A, and Canadian Tire Formula 2000 Series. You know, the only thing that's managed to survive is 1600, which seems to be pretty strong, but it's where do those guys go next? You know, what has happened, you know, why all that happened. You know, you can blame it on a recession, but I don't buy it. It's not recession related. It's an organizational thing that's got out of control in Canada. I believe that the tobacco companies, when they were sponsoring different series, could have gotten along better, and perhaps they all could have survived, and the sport should have been managed better, in that they could all compete and get their marketing value. But it became a real war, it seemed like, and you know, unfortunately, the racing has suffered. Two of the tobacco companies no longer are involved in car racing in Canada, which is a real shame. I don't know exactly why. I have my suspicions, and I really believe that the integrity of the sport wasn't protected, or else a lot of the stuff would still exist. And it's a real shame. It's something that I'd like to participate in trying to rebuild, but you know, I don't have the time for it at the moment. But it's certainly a real source of concern for me, and maybe even a little bit of bitterness. Racing is a very difficult sport that requires a lot of money, and you know, we had a great thing going from about 85 to 92, and you know, the racers really suffered. You know, we all put a lot into it, invested a lot of money and time, and it was gone just like that. It's, you know, hopefully we all can learn something from why all that happened, and it'll slowly make its way back. I sure hope so, because
Yeah.
that next crop, I don't know where they're going to come from. The guys that are in 1600, where are they going to go next? To go to like Formula 2000, it's a U.S.-based series. So there's an automatic 35, 37, 40-cent increase on every dollar you got to spend if you're going to go compete down there. And it's a really tough deal. And without the races being showcased like they used to, it makes attracting sponsorship a very difficult proposition unless you've got wealthy parents or family.
It's a very good perspective on the status of the sport, and I've heard it as well. It's some talk of pro drivers getting involved with some sort of rejuvenizing the programs in some way. Maybe, who knows who's going to get involved, I guess. But like you said, yourself included, it's hard to try and spend the time to do that right now. But what about region racing? Did you actually start off with the region racing?
Absolutely, and I haven't been to a regional race in quite some time. But that's where I got my racing license. Way back when. in a Datsun 510, and then went on to race a Formula Ford in Ontario and Quebec region competition. A very important aspect as well, that it seems like the amateur level of racing is getting itself in shape. They've gone through some organizational headaches as well in terms of managing the regions and all the clubs that are involved. One of the difficult aspects that we have in Canada is there isn't the membership support like they have in the United States to keep things rolling either at a semi-professional level. One of the beauties that the SCCA has is a 50 or 60,000 membership pool of money to draw from. So when they're going through sponsorship difficulties, they still have a great source of income to support their programs, like the Trans Am Series and the Atlantic program that they run, and various other levels of semi-pro, and it's done through membership. The SCCA, because of the size of their membership and the funding they have coming in through membership, they were able to support their professional series when they're suffering from a lack of sponsorship. Whether the Trans Am Series is a perfect example. It's been around 30 years. I mean, it's been around. It's the oldest running road racing series in the United States, or in North America for that matter, and has not always had a title sponsor, but it's been able to sustain itself, and it's because of the size of the Sports Car Club of America. They're really looking to make a next step in their marketing. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, here you go. On track.
He's got to get us on track. The stats are needed.
Where's Dad's car? Are you stuck? What? No. Well, come sit with Dad.
Oh, it got his foot.
Oh, you had your foot stuck in there. Oh, you're having on track. There you go. Where's Dad? Is Dad in that one?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, he's sure of that too.
But I think there are lessons to be learned on both sides. We had tremendous racing. When players and Rothmans and Export A and Canadian Tire were involved in sponsoring series. What it did was breed a great crop of talent that is now making the Americans angry, in a nutshell.
And making us proud.
Yeah. But unfortunately, I don't know that we're getting that racing is getting enough notoriety yet in this country in terms of the sporting media and sort of general media in this country understand that at the levels of IndyCar and Formula Atlantic, Trans Am, Indy Lights, the chances of having such a basically a small country produce winning drivers at all these levels, all the major road racing levels in the United States, and being near dominant. It's very, very slim, and it doesn't happen very. I mean, the only country we've seen that produced that type of talent has been Brazil, and you know, but a much bigger country, a bigger you know, group to draw from. It's just I don't think that we're getting the notoriety we deserve. I think as Canadians in general, you know, that Tracy's and Villeneuve's and Goodyear and Greg Moore, you know, Bourbonnais. I mean, the list is it's short, but long in terms of results, and it's a shame. I hope it doesn't take too long for the media to really pick up and think, how does this happen? You know, it's a result of the quality of racing and the venues that we've been able to run at in predominantly Eastern Canada that's produced this crop. But you know, to go beyond that, it's where's the next group going to come from? That's a tough question to get answered.
Yeah, let's hope there's more in the future. But as far as the Trans Am is concerned and your future, what do you look forward to beyond the Trans Am, or is this something that you'd be more than happy saying that I'm a professional driver in the Trans Am series, and that's where you go?
Well, I feel very fortunate to be making a living there. You gonna be a director, buddy? I mean, that was my goal. I didn't come from a wealthy family background, and it's taken me a long time to get in a position to be to make a living just at this level. You know, my heart has always been in open wheel cars, but I've been able to make a living through racing closed wheel cars. In order for me to take a step out beyond Trans Am, I'm not leaving until I win a championship, for one, and it's got to be done carefully. Even when I moved from the Players GM Series to Trans Am, it was done over a period of a couple of years until I was able to get in a position that I could solidly get an opportunity in Trans Am that I couldn't get, you know, here in Canada. You know, because I mean, I have to make a living. Yeah. So that to go to the next step, whether it be maybe a little Winston Cup, NASCAR maybe. I like to do the Indy 500. You know, we've got to tread carefully and get our feet wet at the next level while still being successful in something else. It's important to not forget, you know, what got you the success in the first place. You know, and winning races and hopefully a championship in Trans Am will lead to other things. You know, I'm interested in doing whatever Chevrolet wants. I mean, they may take on some other road racing program that they find that's new and interesting, and I'll be part of that. I mean, I'll be perfectly happy to do that. I love road racing. That's what I would like to do. But boy, you look at the money that's in Winston Cup, and you think, got to try that.
Yeah. Well, actually, that was a point, I guess, maybe last year even, where we were hearing and reading stuff about you doing some possible Grand National driving back with Ford. Is Buzz McCall interested in going beyond Trans Am? Have they accomplished all that they can and they're ready to move, or are they Trans Am based and that's it? If you move on, you're moving with Chevrolet and some other team?
Well, I think I don't think necessarily Buzz McCall is as satisfied with his road racing. I mean, he's certainly happy with his road racing, but in no means does he want to leave the Trans Am Series.
Have you guys been talking about something
Well,
else?
Buzz, yeah, oh, absolutely. It had some effect on my decision to come to his team in general. Buzz started a Busch Grand National team this year, and is getting his feet wet in that, and we'll get a chance to run later in the season, I think. You know, I tested a Winston Cup Thunderbird last year. You know, it was on an oval, a short oval, and it was surprisingly like driving my old showroom stock Camaro with 750 horsepower. It was, they seemed a lot closer to a showroom stock car than they did a sophisticated Trans Am car.
That's interesting.
You know, perhaps I needed to drive a better one.
Well, you know, I sure hope that your birthday present, a week following your birthday, is the season finale. And boy, I sure hope that this year it brings you a championship.
Well, I hope so too. This is the 30th year of the Trans Am Series, and And yeah, that'd be somewhat historic if we could win one and do it for Chevrolet. They've really upped their attack this year to get back that manufacturers championship that they lost. And you know, we won Detroit again. That was big for Chevrolet. They hadn't won that 4 or 5 years. So I hope that I hope this is a year. And if not, you know, we'll go at it again next year. I have full confidence in this team that eventually we'll get this done, and they seem to have it in me as well.
Yeah, everybody here has it in you. Go get it.
Thanks, Glenn.
Our thanks to Ron and Linda for inviting us into their home, and of course to Sam for being such a special part of the show. Now tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, you're not going to want to miss Motorsport Speedway Thunder, because we have the finale for the championships in the Thunder cars, the modifieds, late model sportsmen's, and the super late models will be back this weekend as well. Jeff Hanley and John Owen are going for the championship there as well. There's much to be decided in each of the classes. So until next week, I'm Glenn Butt. We'll see you back here on Pit Stop.